Welcome to Life Coaching for Dance Studio Owners. Each week, we talk money, mindset, and self-care to help you live a more peaceful life and lead a more profitable business. Let's get started. Today, I have Joe Naftal here, and I'm excited to talk to him about managing recitals. Joe knows a lot about managing recitals and productions, and so he's a great resource. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Of course, Ginger. Thank you so much for having me. Always fun for us to chat.
Yeah. So I thought that it would be great to first just talk about just that whole process of managing recitals. I know there's some newer studio owners out there who are like, okay, I've done the little thing at the church hall, but now I have
Yeah,
more students and more staff to manage. So what are some things that people need to kind of think about in terms of the bases they need to cover?
absolutely. So, I mean, for me, just a little bit of background. I was born into recital life. My mom had me about 2 weeks before she had her fifth dance recital for her studio, and basically she came out of the hospital and it was like, okay, we got errands to run, we got a show to put on. So, I really don't know a life without recitals and that sort of chaos. I was thrown right into it from an early age, and as our studio grew, and we started off 36 years ago with 75 students and have continued to grow. The one thing that I've kind of realized is that the resourcing of time and resourcing of staffing that we have, that usually doesn't grow with the recital. We still need to manage more and more dancers as our studio or as our program grows. But we still only have maybe a half hour before the show. We still only have a limited number of staff members or backstage volunteers. So we have to figure out how to scale those resources to manage bigger shows within those same constraints.
Yeah, definitely. And so in your setup, in your studio, I imagine you're doing multiple shows. It's not just one big show, right?
Yeah, we do 9 performances of shows. Some dancers are in one show, some dancers are in multiple shows, and we try and keep them to around 80 to 90 minutes max so that it's a nice bite-sized show.
Yeah. I like to call it like dad friendly. Like the moms will
Yes.
sit through the whole thing, but the dads are like, all right, like I
Yep,
got things to go. Let's wrap this up.
exactly. Yeah. If Grandpa enjoys the recital, we've done our job for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when it comes to figuring things out, the thing that everybody struggles with is checking everybody in, making sure that they know which dancers are in which backstage spaces. Because as we grow, right? Back in the day, I remember I worked for a studio. It was pretty small. It was just like, oh, we just had like the high school's music room. And that was
Right.
just all the students
Yeah.
in one big room. But we need to make order out of chaos. So then dividing students into spaces and stuff, and figuring out like staffing for each of those areas to be supervising, but then also making sure they oversee like costume changes and getting them to the stage on time. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And the thing with recitals is we're taking our entire student base out of the studio into an unfamiliar facility that they're not in all of the time. So when we think about safety, when we think about security, when we think about organization, we need to level that up a little more than we might do at the studio when maybe you only have 20 or 30 students in the studio at a time, and everyone who walks in and out. The teacher knows all of their dancers' parents and who they belong to. Once we put them into a recital, which, like you said, could be in a high school auditorium, could be in a big performing arts center, could be in a church, whatever it might be, there's hallways, there's all these different things, and all these different points that we don't have control over. So we need to figure out how to add that level of control. There's maybe different parents coming to pick them up or see the show that maybe aren't the parent that's coming weekly on Saturday mornings. So it's really important that we make sure that we're giving the dancer back to the right caregiver at the end of the show. We know that there are sticky family situations sometimes that we don't want to
Mm.
make the wrong choice on. We need to make sure, we might have a student for 30 minutes a week, and now we're taking them backstage for 2.5 hours, right? The medical information, the behavioral information, the stuff that a teacher might know because they deal with them for 30 weeks. Now, a backstage volunteer, how are they going to know that same information so that they can give that child the correct amount of care without having to yell someone's sensitive information across the room, or knowing they need to have their inhaler or whatever it might need to be, making sure that everyone can be on that same page. And at the same time, recitals are inherently stressful. They're inherently something that there's a lot to manage and go on with. And I think the reason that it becomes very stressful for a studio owner, for a director, for a manager, is you become like the gatekeeper of information, right? Like everyone's
Yeah.
calling your name. They're saying, Miss Ginger, what do we have next? Where do we go for this? Where do we go for that? And it's like, how can we free up us as being, the central information agency of all of that and empower everyone to have access to what they need to do their job and not have to keep running to you when you're trying to do an impossible task, produce and manage a show.
Yeah. It's funny when you mentioned that example, Miss Ginger, Miss Ginger. I'm fortunate that that is not the case.
Yeah,
We have, stage managers handling these things. And it's when I say stage managers, it is not some outside professional who descends upon us. It is my existing staff who have experience in theater handling the ins and outs. And, we started off with, a small staff, we've grown. And one of the things I encourage people to do is to delegate out these tasks because I have literally seen studio owners with the headset on. They're
yeah.
calling the light cues. They're like worrying about, who's on stage. They're running back. I'm like, what are you doing
Mhm.
when you have faculty and staff? Give
Yeah,
them something to do because they want to help. They want to see the show. They want to be a part of it. So definitely, like, get your full staff involved in these events, I would say.
absolutely. And I think, they're doing all of that. And then on top of that, they're having a parent ask, oh, hey, I didn't read the email about what dressing room I'm supposed to be in. So could you go over that with me? And it's like, as much as a student, that is important. We want everyone to
Right.
service everyone, but it's also like that's the least of my worries right now as the curtain's opening and the lights are going on.
Yeah.
So making sure that they can self-service some of that information as well in an
Yeah.
easily digestible way.
I think too, like the thread that goes through all of this is communication,
Mhm.
communication with each group of people that's involved with the show.
Yeah,
Um, I know that, some people, I think I saw it in a Facebook group recently. Someone's like, I did like a recital meeting and like nobody showed up. Or I tried to do it on Zoom and then I'm trying to do the presentation. Um, do you have any suggestions for studio owners who are just trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I just get all the information to parents? Because I think a lot of us are still doing that, like, I'm gonna just give you a big old booklet and
yeah.
you got to download it.
I think with any sort of parent communications, like the first step is acceptance and like
Yeah.
accepting that they're not going to read the 30-page PDF of instructions. And like once you accept that, then you can move on to solving the issues. But I think the big thing is they're not going to do it ahead of time. They're not going to attend a meeting. Even if they do attend a meeting, they're not going to digest all of that information a month later once they're on site at the venue. So really, how can you deliver that information to them at the time that they need it, at the time that they care about it, at the time that they're about to go do it? And how can you boil it down to the bare minimum? So at our studio, we put like a one pager in every costume in their garment bag. And I basically told my team, I'm like, what can we boil down to the things they have to know? Like they need
Right.
to know the address of the venue, they need to know what time to show up, and they need to know that they need to bring this garment bag with them.
Yeah.
Anything else we could probably solve as long as they arrive at the venue on time and have a costume. We could probably
Yeah.
fix everything else. But at bare minimum, what's our like? If you read nothing else, read this one piece of paper, or set of instructions.
Yeah. We discovered a few years ago, I think it was actually like coming out of COVID, we had a bunch of new students who had never experienced the recital cycle. And we are like, how do we do this? So we have like a Facebook group for our families and community. And we had somebody go live in the Facebook group and explain all the different things so that brand new families can figure it out. But then we left it there. So, maybe 20 people logged in, but then hundreds of views afterwards. And, weeks later, people are commenting, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. This is so helpful. And I think sometimes we try to cram, like you said, you cram everything into this one document. Like, how come you didn't read it? It's like, well, you wouldn't have read it. Like, who read the manual to their car?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the other thing we do is we know, okay, everybody is going to forget when the show is. They're going to forget when to be at dress rehearsal and all of that. We send out just a simple text, save the date,
Mhm.
add it to your calendar now. we also still text them on those due dates and the day before the due dates that the thing is happening and what time, because we don't expect that with all that's going on in their life that they're going to remember that detail. And like you said, sometimes it's not the regular person who brings them who's now handling dress rehearsal drop off or the day of the show check in. So,
Yeah. And I think it's hard for us as studio owners, as dance teachers, who for us, dance is the most important thing in our lives. It's the thing that we wake up thinking about.
yeah.
And it's not for all of our families, and that's okay. That's why they come to a dance studio, but it might
Yeah.
be number five or number six on the priority list. Well, we think of it as number one. So
Yeah.
understanding balancing all of those things.
Yeah. So, with that, I think one of the things that is challenging is kind of the limitations that we have with various methods that we're using to organize our shows. So some people are they're writing it on sticky notes and moving them around on their desktop till they figure it out, and then transferring that to maybe a Word or a Word document or a spreadsheet. I know a lot of the studio softwares they'll like order your show for you. Like we use Studio Pro, and it'll give us the order of the show and do different things. But when it comes to like who's on the stage and who's in the wings and things like that, it doesn't work for us at all. And, those companies are great for registration and things, but like there's kind of like this gap, I would say. What are some things that you've done? I know you've developed something that you use for your own studio and then you offer it to other people now, to kind of make those things easier.
Yeah, so about, oh, I don't know, 7 years ago, I was looking for that. I was looking for what software we could employ in our studio to manage all of those backstage pieces. And I found either that they were really expensive, and they were meant for, big conferences or big,
Yeah.
corporate events, or they just didn't exist or they didn't work the way a dance studio and a dance recital worked. So I went out and created just a prototype of something that I could use for my own studio. And at the time, it was called Check and Point. Really, we just needed something to check dancers in,
Mm,
check them out. The clipboard wasn't working anymore because if we had
right.
one person with a clipboard, that slowed down the line. If we had five people with a clipboard, those didn't sync with each other. So there was no way to
Exactly.
very easily see who was there and who wasn't there. So we launched Check and Point just for our own studio. And
Hmm.
then immediately after it, people said, "Oh, that's great." I showed it to some friends and they were like, "How do I sign up?" And I was like, "Oh no, we never meant for this to be a commercial product." So I went back and recreated it as something studios could use. And then as it kept going on, I had more conversations with studio owners and figured out more and more of those performance pain points of things that they were trying to find a workaround for that we could just solve head on if we created the tool they needed. So this past year, we rebranded as ShowSculptor. Really is an all-in-one performance management platform to help you with communicating with your parents through email and text. Being able to segment down to the individual routine or the dressing room they're in or which shows they're a part of. Being able to track when they get checked in and making sure that your staff or your volunteers or your backstage crew have access to the information that they need and not have access to the information they don't need. But so they can see the lighting and sound and scenery notes. They can see what side of the stage dancers are supposed to get put on, how many dancers are supposed to be ready for that dance, what dressing room everyone's supposed to be in, all in one centralized place so everyone can be on the same page, not yelling Mr. Joe backstage trying to find out that information, and be able to self-serve, find the information when they need it most.
Yeah. So you mentioned like parent communication. What might
Yeah.
that look like during the day of the show?
Absolutely. So you can send a message to all of your dancers, which might be some of those reminders of, today's recital day. Here are, like we said, those that boil down three things we need you to know and you can't forget.
Yeah.
But it could also be segmenting it down to specific groups. Like maybe you need to tell your preschool dancers something different than your competition dancers who are, 17 or 18 years old, right? They have a different set of instructions and reminders than someone who's never been to a recital. So you can segment those messages in that way. Or after the show, you find, a costume and a headpiece in dressing room A, you can specifically message dressing room A, hey, someone left your headpiece, come get it, and not message everyone. So being able to drill down that communication to those different segments, even down to a single dancer, being able to say, oh, Susie has a tummy ache. Can you come backstage to check on her? Or she forgot her headpiece. Can you come bring that back? Maybe it's in the car. But being able to manage that communication so it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, I think that's really useful. Now, you mentioned communication with parents. What would that look like? Because like
Yeah,
as we know, right now studio software is not really built for that. So
right.
it's just like somebody has to log into the system and try to do it on an iPad and it doesn't scroll right. Like,
Yeah. So yeah, we have an easy email builder, so you can build stuff that looks great, and then you can segment out to the people that you want to get it. And same with text messaging as well. Really, just making it as easy as possible, and that the right people have access to that. Because if you are that studio owner who's backstage with your headset on, making sure that the curtain opens and closes, you want to make sure that someone else is empowered to be able to send that message to a parent, and to make sure that it's something that can go right to the like everyone has email and everyone has a text message line that they can get to.
yeah,
They might not be able to download an app. They might not be able, or they might not want to, right? This is at
right.
least something that we know that they can receive a text message. We know that they can
Yeah.
receive an email.
Yeah, that's really smart. So, where can people find out more information?
Yeah, so if you just go to showsculptor.com, we have a free demo. We actually have a free level of the account as well. It has some costume management tools and some production management tools that you can get started with just right off the bat.
Whoa, what are the costume management? I didn't know
Yeah,
there was costume management.
yeah. So we just rolled that in. It was a previous product called Costume Folio that we
Okay.
just joined into ShowSculptor. And this allows you to take out the sticky notes in costume books, take out the ripping out the catalog pages and sharing them between your teachers, and really be able to keep that all in one place with what those costume choices are. You can add comments onto costumes if you have teachers looking at costumes and submitting them to you. You can hide pricing from some of your staff and show pricing to other parts of your staff, depending on what permissions you set. And then you could look at some reporting. So we know a lot of studios like to curate their costumes. They want to make sure that not everyone has a red or blue costume, right? We want to make
Right.
sure there's some variety. And they want to make sure that the pricing is set. Like maybe you have thresholds that every preschool costume has to fit between X and Y. You can at least see them all on a graph to say, oh, this costume is an outlier. We need to address this one. Or
Yeah.
all of these kind of even each other out. So maybe that's fine.
That sounds like a great feature. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So I will be sure to link that in the show notes so that people can go check it out and do that free demo that you mentioned. So as we wrap up, any words of wisdom from doing this for how long has it been? How many years have you been doing this?
For me, since I was born, so 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh. So, any words of wisdom about getting started with making changes to your recital management? If someone has just been doing it on a pad and paper, with their pen, what's the first step? Like what's your words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I mean, pick one thing out of, don't try and solve everything in 1 year. If it's
Yeah.
check in and check out process, start with that. If it's your getting dancers lined up backstage, if it's making sure people know what dressing room to go to, pick one thing that you think you can really solve this year, and then just solve it. Because at the end of the day, your recital is supposed to be a celebration of all of your students' hard work, all of your
Yeah.
staff's hard work, and all of your hard work that you've done. It's supposed to be your celebration at the end of the year. So if it's something that you're stressed about or you just
Mm,
want to get it over with, we got to make a change because it really should be something that you enjoy throughout the entire process.
yeah. Very wise words. So, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. And I hope all your 9 shows go really well this season, Joe.
Of
Take
course,
care.
Ginger. Thanks so much.
Hey there. If you're finding value in our podcast and want to dive deeper, I'd love to work with you through my coaching program. Together, we can tackle the challenges of running a dance studio and find your path to peace and profits as a business owner. Visit gingerhaithcox.com/coaching and get started today.